The nation is gripped and ready to be taught a lesson. That sounds a bit nasty. I'm going to teach you a lesson. I didn't mean it like that. I meant that genuinely we are going to learn on the radio right now because we are joined by the one and only Dr. Chris. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Gareth. Great to be with you again.
I've noticed, are you growing a moustache?
Can you see it?
Or is it dirt?
There's a little bit of hair down here as well on my chin.
Right.
So, I don't know, just haven't shaved.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say, if it's a windy day outside, try and avoid it, because you'll probably lose the moustache, to be honest with you.
There's not a lot. There's not a lot. But, yeah, I don't know. It probably won't last.
Well, what Chris hasn't got in facial hair, he makes up for in intelligence. How does that sound?
I don't know. I think that's a compliment. I need to reflect on that.
So, each and every Monday, Chris joins us and he educates us really on some incredible things. There was a lot of great feedback last week when we were talking about Noah's Ark. And it was really interesting because you claimed that you don't think that humans will ever find Noah's Ark because the wood would have probably have been recycled and it may have been a coffee table.
Yeah, that's right. We may have a little bit of Noah's Ark inside our TV cabinets at home.
Do you ever think this, or is it me? So water, I was watching this really incredible documentary the other day, and basically there isn't, in a sense, any new water, because what tends to happen is that, of course, it evaporates up into the clouds, and then it rains down again. So if that's true, I could have just made a cup of coffee with some water that Jesus Christ consumed and maybe passed.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That is a
strange thought.
It is a very strange thought. And of course, the air we breathe as well, the air around us is also all recycling. So you may well be breathing air that, I don't know, Julius Caesar breathed.
Incredible thing.
Yeah.
So what have you got for us this morning, Chris? Because we look forward to my explanations of what you're holding up. I think that potentially they've got worse over recent weeks, not better. But what have you got for us?
Well, it's all entertaining, isn't it? Really. Okay, so this time we're going to go to a place. And so I just want you, to describe the place. I think you'll know where the place is when I show you the photo.
Is it Jerusalem?
Look, it might be something in Jerusalem. Let me
okay.
It is in Jerusalem.
Right.
But I want to describe what you're about to see, and we're going to think about what it is. And this is, for many of us, the kind of ground zero for archaeology. This is one of the most important places of the wall. And yeah, it's a very complicated place. So here's a very famous image. And Gareth, can you tell us about what it is for the sake of the listeners, what you and I are looking at?
So we're looking at, now, I could, of course, give it away quite easily and look at the heading of the tab that you're holding up to the screen.
I didn't notice that.
I won't do that because that completely spoil the feature. But what we are looking at is we've got a square building, and on the top of it, there is a gold dome. Now, the perspective of this photograph, it doesn't look very big, to be honest. It looks like, I'm trying to get the sizes ready. If you were to maybe put two regular houses together, I think you'd be looking at what size this is. Or is that just the perspective of the photograph and you're going to tell me that actually this is as big as the Taj Mahal?
No, that's pretty good what you've described. It's not enormous.
And you've got, I don't know if the colour's anything to do with it or if it's relevant, but what you've got the first layer is a cream white colour. And then the second layer, just before the gold dome starts, you've got a sort of, what colour would you call that, Chris? It isn't really blue, is it?
It's a blue. It's a bluey colour. Yeah, it's a bluey colour.
And we've got actually, let me count these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 windows on each side. So presumably 7 times 4 because it's got 4 sides. Now, if you would like to have a go at this and get in touch and try and guess What it is that we're going to be talking about this morning from my description, I think that's an all right description, really. Then the number is 0161 511 9555. 0161 511 9555 on WhatsApp. And wait where you are, because we'll be back in just a moment with the answer. Well, I think it's safe to say
Yes.
that I've stumped a lot of people. Now, I'm surprised by this because as descriptions go, this was probably one of the easiest ones. And it surprises me because over recent weeks, there's been something like a tree stump, which I've given such a vague description of, and you've guessed it right. But this morning, nobody has got it right at all. Now, I don't know if this is people winding me up, but a few people have said, is it the Taj Mahal? Is that because I mentioned about the size of the Taj Mahal in comparison to this? It is not the Taj Mahal. And the last time I checked, even I know that this isn't the fact. It's not anywhere near Jerusalem, the Taj Mahal. I'm right on that, aren't I, Dr. Chris?
You certainly are right on that one, Gareth. Yeah.
Right. So what have you got for us this morning? We're chomping at the bit.
Well, I reckon all the listeners know this image. I mean, it is, I think, a very beautiful structure, and you described it so beautifully, Gareth. I'm astonished that people didn't immediately say that's the Dome on the Rock in Jerusalem. If you have any picture in the news, and I'm afraid right now Israel's in the news, so there's yet more conflict, and you'll often see in the background to a reporter a golden dome looming in the distance, and that will be the Dome on the Rock. And this is a really, really interesting site from an archaeological point of view. As you described it, it's got a golden dome, about the size of a couple of houses. It's not huge, but it's big, it's impressive, beautifully constructed. It's actually octagonal, it's not square, it's got 8 sides, so it's bigger than it looked from the photo. But that was a perspective, Gareth, so I'll let you off that one. Now, this was built in the 7th century, so it's, what is that, 1400 years old. And it was built by the Islamic conquerors of Jerusalem. And it's not a mosque. People sometimes think it's a mosque. It's not a mosque, it's a shrine. One of the 2 very holy sites in Islam, or 3 holy sites, but 2 holy structures in Islam. Now that makes it an Islamic site, but it's not just an Islamic site. And I'll tell you a few things about the Dome on the Rock, and you'll see why Israel, the modern state of Israel, is such a complicated place for everybody. See, the Dome on the Rock was built by the Muslims, but it was built on a site that had been occupied previously by the temple, by the Jewish temple that we read about in the Bible, going back to King Solomon building the temple, and then King Herod at the time of Jesus. That fabulous temple we read about in the Bible was destroyed by the Romans. It was knocked down. They built a little Roman temple that was briefly there, then that got knocked down. And on the ruins, on the remains, when Islam arrived in the 600s AD, 7th century AD, they built the structure I showed you in the photo with that lovely golden dome. And that is an Islamic shrine, but it's protecting, if you go inside, a little rocky outcrop. And that little rocky outcrop is a mountain peak. You wouldn't know nowadays because it's all been built on top of, so you wouldn't know you're looking at a little mountain peak. But that would have been the summit of what the Bible calls Mount Moriah. And Mount Moriah, for listeners who don't know, is a very important mountain in the book of Genesis where Abraham took his son Isaac. And this mountain peak became the Holy of Holies. It was structured in such a way that that would be the very special place where the Jewish priests would bring sacrifices for over 1,000 years. And now it's protected by this building that the Muslims constructed in the 7th century. Now, from the point of view of archaeology, Gareth, if we were out there with a shovel or a spade, we would love to dig there. I mean, it's incredible to think what you would find enclosed in that site. But we're not allowed to. And it's part of the tensions of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a hotbed, really, of different religious sensitivities and claims of ownership. It's claimed as a very holy site for the Jewish people. It's claimed as a holy site for the Muslim people. And so there's a tension, a real physical tension there between different claims of ownership. And just to throw one other thing in, okay, I think what I showed you is a really beautiful building. Beautiful colours, beautiful structure, beautiful way it was built. Do you know when the Muslims had this built in the 7th century, 600s, they were warriors and merchants who arrived in Jerusalem, and they wanted to build a holy structure. Just after the time of Muhammad, they wanted a holy structure built. The only architects they could employ to build a building, a big building like this, were Byzantine Christian architects. And the only big building that Christians knew how to build in the 7th century were churches. So that structure you saw is a perfect example of what we call a Byzantine church. That's how they used to build their churches back in the 5th, 6th century. So in really ancient times, early church impressive buildings were built that way. And so what you've got preserved there in Jerusalem is a perfect example of Christian architecture that was commissioned by the Muslims as their own shrine. Now, Gareth, the tensions go on, and in the news, you'll be hearing about more tensions in Israel today. The bullets are fired and missiles are fired and so on, because all around the land of Israel, there's a struggle over ownership. And so the Jews, the Muslims struggle over ownership of this site, and the proud archaeologists can't even get a look in. But I tell you what, as an archaeologist, what I love, Gareth, is that we believe not in the importance of a place, but in the importance of a person, Jesus. And the wonderful thing about Jesus is he is the person who allows us to meet with God. And because it's a person, not a place, he is available for everybody. The doors are wide open. Doesn't matter what your background is, how you've been brought up, Jesus welcomes everybody. So rather than a place that people are fighting over, we have a person who we can offer to everyone. So I love the archaeology and I love Jerusalem and the city, but all these tensions really remind me of how wonderful it is. It's good news, what Jesus came to bring, and it's something available to everybody.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we have him as the star of the show on a Monday. What would you give to dig there, Chris? What would you give to be able to actually get your shovel and start going?
I would give a lot. Yeah. I mean, we can nearly dig there. And I'll tell you what, something interesting that I've done before with some students that I've got. The owners of the site, the people who run the site, they've laid cable and pipe work, and they did it without any archaeologists. They brought in excavators, earth movers, dug out loads of earth from around that site called the Temple Mount, dumped it in the nearby Kidron Valley, and just left it there while they built all their cabling and pipe work. Now, some archaeologists got hold of the rubble, and I've joined in this a couple of times, actually. They've got the rubble, they've gathered it together and been wet sifting it through a sieve. You get a sieve, have some water, and you can sieve the rubble and you find amazing things. Tiny fragments of pottery and arrowheads from all through the history of the Jerusalem's occupation. Now, that's amazing. The problem with it from the point of view of the archaeology is it's all muddled up. You don't know which level it came from because it was all just dumped. But still, it is amazing. And one of my students actually found a fragment of the earliest period of the Islamic structure. So in other words, when they built those beautiful blue and white tiles that you saw, we were trying to find the color name for it, but let's just call it blue. They've been replaced over the years because they've cracked and so on. And they found one of the very earliest from the beginnings of the Islamic period, which just reminds us archaeologists aren't trying to prove any particular religion. And, we love to understand the history of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Taj Mahal, we love the history of all people. And that kind of work, it's called the Temple Mount Sifting Project, is the nearest we can get to doing some archaeology on the Temple Mount.
Now, did that student get a distinction because of that find?
No, got him an ice cream. That's it. And then it goes to museum.
Thank you very much, Chris. Always a real treat to have you on. And do you know, if you're reading the papers or you're currently reading some sort of history book and you think, I'd like to find out more about that. Well, we've got this, I'm going to call you genius. We've got this genius here, ladies and gentlemen, on the show every Monday who can answer your questions, then send them through to us. Send it via email. So whatever time of day it doesn't get lost, it comes straight to us here, studio@connectradio.com. Chris, thank you very much.
Thanks, Gareth.